Okay, good evening, everybody. It's nice to see you all out tonight. We are continuing in Ezra. We're going to be starting in Ezra chapter 4. Before we do, let's go to God in prayer. Our God, we're thankful for you. We're thankful for who you are and what you mean to us. We're thankful that you're a God who is patient, who is loving, who is merciful and gracious. We hope that you will continue in your mercy and your grace. We hope that we will learn to be more like you. We pray that we'll take this time tonight studying from your word, applying it, thinking about what it means for us, not just from a historical standpoint, but from what it means for us as a people of God. And we hope you'll be with us in that study. We pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay. So in Ezra chapters 1 through 3, which is where we started last time, Zerubbabel, or as I kept calling him at home today on accident, Zerubbabel, and Crystal thought that that was the most adorable name for this person. We'll just call him Zerubbabel. Yeah. Zerubbabel and Yeshua, along with others. 11 names total in Ezra. When Nehemiah restates this group in the book of Nehemiah, it's 12 names, which I don't know, from a prophetic symbolism in the scripture type standpoint, I kind of like having 12 names there a little bit better. But they've led a wave of about 50,000 former exiles back to the region of Judah and Jerusalem. We looked at how Cyrus, the king of the Medo-Persian Empire, or if you look it up, you'll also see it called the Achaemenid Empire. He's released them. He's granted them gifts. He's asked the people to assist them and help them. Basically, they have his protection in going back home and rebuilding. The priests and the people in those chapters restore sacrificial worship. They observe the Feast of Booths in the 7th month on the Hebrew calendar. They start rebuilding the temple and they lay the foundation for that. Now, there are going to be a couple differences about this temple, though. One of them we're going to see today. One of them we're just not going to see at all because it never gets brought up. God's presence never descends on this temple the way it did the Temple of Solomon or the tabernacle before that at the end of Exodus. There's a word for it. I didn't write it down. That's just describing God's presence, and that's considered by rabbis one of those things that stayed lost, was God's glory descending on the temple. And then the other thing that never gets put back in the temple, and this one some of you might get, just see if you can get this here. What else never gets put back in the temple? Indiana Jones found it. There we go, yeah. Yeah, the ark. It never mentions when the ark got lost in the midst of all this, presumably when Babylon ransacked Jerusalem, but it never calls out, and this is when they lost the ark. It just never gets mentioned. But it also never gets restored, and to this day, there's no ark. Yeah, you're right. Oh, yeah. So John mentions that it also never mentions, like, construction-wise with this temple, if there is a holiest of holies in there, um, where the ark would have gone if they had ever recovered it. Now, I said in the beginning here with King Cyrus, they have basically the support and the protection of King Cyrus in this effort. But time passes, kings change, and that's where we pick up in Ezra chapter 4. Now, I'm going to do something weird here. I'm going to try to read Ezra chapters 4, 5, and 6 in what I think is the chronological order of events, not the order that they're written. Because if you try to put this together chronologically, then it can get a little bit challenging, because kings are mentioned in chapter 4 who don't start ruling until after a major king in chapters 5 and 6. All right? And I haven't posted the link to them yet, but if you do access my notes online, I put together a nice list of the kings of the Achaemenid Empire, when they ruled, and which Bible characters they line up with. I will mention that none of the Dariuses that you see mentioned anywhere in that list are Daniel's Darius. There's no historical evidence of Darius outside of the Bible. That's not to say people are saying, oh, he must not have existed. But it's just, well, we don't know how or where to put him in this list because he's not mentioned anywhere else. We don't know if he was like a co-regent. We don't know if he was like a puppet king or something like that. So Daniel's Darius is never mentioned in this list here. So I'm going to start in Ezra chapter 4. And pretty quickly here, we're going to jump into chapter 5, chapter 6, and then read the rest of chapter 4. I'll let you know where I am. Oh, I need to double check one name here before I... Yep. That's where I should split. Okay. When the enemies, this is chapter 4, verse 1, when the enemies of Judah and Benjamin heard that the returned exiles were building a temple for the Lord, the God of Israel, they approached Zerubbabel and the family heads and said to them, let us build with you, for we also worship your God. I have been sacrificing to him since the time King Esarhaddon of Assyria brought us here. But Zerubbabel, Jeshua, and the other heads of Israel's families answered them, you may have no part with us in building a house for our God, since we alone will build it for the Lord, the God of Israel, as King Cyrus, the king of Persia, has commanded us. Then the people who were already in the land discouraged the people of Judah and made them afraid to build. These people also bribed officials to act against the Jews, to frustrate their plans throughout the reign of King Cyrus of Persia until the reign of King Darius of Persia. Now I'm skipping to chapter 5, verse 1. But when the prophets Haggai and Zechariah, son of Iddo, prophesied to the Jews who were in Judah and Jerusalem in the name of the God of Israel who was over them, Zerubbabel, son of Shealtiel, and Jeshua, son of Jozadak, began to rebuild God's house in Jerusalem. The prophets of God were with them, helping them. At that time, Tattenai, the governor of the region west of the Euphrates River, Shether-Bozenai, and their colleagues came to the Jews and asked, who gave you the order to rebuild this temple and finish this structure? Tattenai and the others also asked the Jews, What are the names of the workers who are constructing this building? But God was watching over the Jewish elders. These men wouldn't stop them until a report was sent to Darius, so they could receive written instructions about this matter. This is the letter of the text that Tattenai, the governor of the region west of the Euphrates River, Shethar-bozenai, and their colleagues, the officials of the region, sent to King Darius. They sent him a report written as follows: To King Darius, all greetings. Let it be known to the king that we went to the house of the great God in the province of Judah. It is being built with cut stones, and its beams are being set in the walls. This work is being done diligently and succeeding through the people's efforts. So we questioned the elders and asked, who gave you the order to rebuild this temple and finish the structure? We also asked for their names so that we could write down the names of their leaders for your information. Now, the reply they gave us, so this is Tattenai sending the reply that the Jewish elders gave him, and he's forwarding it to Darius. This is the reply they gave us. We are the servants of the God of the heavens and earth, and we are rebuilding the temple that was built many years ago, which a great king of Israel built and finished. But since our ancestors angered the God of the heavens, he handed them over to King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon, the Chaldean, who destroyed this temple and deported the people to Babylon. However, in the first year of King Cyrus of Babylon, Cyrus issued a decree to rebuild the house of God. He also took from the temple in Babylon the gold and silver articles of God's house that Nebuchadnezzar had taken from the temple in Jerusalem and carried them to the temple in Babylon. He released them from the temple in Babylon to a man named Sheshbazzar, the governor by the appointment of King Cyrus. Cyrus told him, take these articles, put them in the temple in Jerusalem, and let the house of God be rebuilt on its original site. Then this same Sheshbazzar came and laid the foundation of God's house in Jerusalem. By the way, Sheshbazzar and Zerubbabel are probably the same person, one being a Babylonian name, one being a Jewish name. Like we have Daniel and Balthazar are the same person. Now I lost my place. Oh, here he is. It has been under construction from that time until now, but it has not been completed. Verse 17 of chapter 5. So if it pleases the king, let a search of the royal archives in Babylon be conducted to see if it is true that a decree was issued by King Cyrus to rebuild the house of God in Jerusalem. Let the king's decision regarding this matter be sent to us. Chapter 6. King Darius gave the order, and they searched in the library of Babylon in the archives. But it was in the fortress of Ecbanta, in the province of Media, that a scroll was found with this record written on it. In the first year of King Cyrus, he issued a decree concerning the house of God in Jerusalem. Let the house be rebuilt as a place for offering sacrifices, and let its original foundations be retained. Its height is to be 90 feet, and its width 90 feet, with 3 layers of cut stones and 1 of timber. The cost is to be paid from the royal treasury. The gold and silver articles of God's house that Nebuchadnezzar took from the temple in Jerusalem and carried to Babylon must also be returned. They are to be brought to the temple in Jerusalem where they belong and put into the house of God. Therefore, you must stay away from that place, Tattenai, governor of the region west of the Euphrates River, Shethar-bozenai, and your colleagues, the officials in the region. Leave the construction of the house of God alone. Let the governor and the elders of the Jews rebuild this house of God on its original site. I hereby issue a decree concerning what you are to do, so that the elders of the Jews can rebuild the house of God. The cost is to be paid in full to these men out of the royal revenues from the taxes of the region west of the Euphrates River, so that the work will not stop. Whatever is needed, young bulls, rams, lambs for burnt offerings to the God of the heavens, or wheat, salt, wine, and oil, as requested by the priests in Jerusalem, let it be given to them every day without fail, so that they can offer sacrifices of pleasing aroma to the God of the heavens and pray for the life of the king and his sons. I also issue a decree concerning any man who interferes with this directive. Let a beam be torn from his house and raised up. He will be impaled on it, and his house will be made into a garbage dump because of this offense. May the God who caused his name to dwell there overthrow any king or people who dares to harm or interfere with this house of God in Jerusalem. I, Darius, have issued the decree. Let it be carried out diligently. Then Tattenai, governor of the region west of the Euphrates River, Shethar-Bozenai, and their colleagues diligently carried out what King Darius had decreed. So the Jewish elders continued successfully with the building under the prophesying of Haggai the prophet and Zechariah, son of Iddo. They finished the building according to the command of the God of Israel and the decree of Cyrus, Darius, and King Artaxerxes of Persia. This house was completed on the 3rd day of the month of Adar in the 6th year of the reign of King Darius. Then the Israelites, including the priests, the Levites, and the rest of the exiles, celebrated the dedication of the house of God with joy for the dedication of God's house. For the dedication of God's house, they offered 100 bulls, 200 rams, and 400 lambs, as well as 12 male goats and a sin offering for all Israel, one for each Israelite tribe. They also appointed the priests by their divisions and let the Levites by their groups to the service of God in Jerusalem, according to what is written in the book of Moses. The exiles observed the Passover on the 14th day of the 1st month. All the priests and Levites were ceremonially clean because they had purified themselves. They had killed the Passover lamb for themselves, their priestly brothers, and all the exiles. The Israelites who had returned from exile ate it together with all who had separated themselves from the uncleanness of the Gentiles of the land in order to worship the Lord, the God of Israel. They observed the festival of unleavened bread for 7 days with joy, because the Lord had made them joyful, having changed the Assyrian king's attitude toward them, so that he supported them in the work on the house of the God of Israel. Now I'm jumping back to chapter 4, verse 6. At the beginning of the reign of Ahasuerus, otherwise known as Xerxes the First, husband to Esther, and came after Darius chronologically in the lineage of kings. At the beginning of the reign of Ahasuerus, the people who were already in the land wrote, so these are the people who are Gentiles who were already in the land, wrote an accusation against the residents of Judah and Jerusalem. Time skip. During the time of King Artaxerxes of Persia, so now a new administration several years later, Bishlam, Mithredath, Tabeel, and the rest of his colleagues wrote to King Artaxerxes. The letter was written in Aramaic and translated. Rehum, the chief deputy, and Shimshai, the scribe, wrote a letter to King Artaxerxes concerning Jerusalem as follows. Here we go. From Rehum, the chief deputy, it's the English word I tripped over, the chief deputy, Shimshai, the scribe, and the rest of their colleagues, the judges and magistrates from Tripolis, Persia, Erech, Babylon, Susa, that is the people of Elam, and the rest of the peoples whom the great and illustrious Ashurbanipal deported and settled in the cities of Samaria and the region west of the Euphrates River. Ashurbanipal was the last great king of Assyria. That's how long these people have been in this region. This is the text of the letter they sent to him, to King Artaxerxes, from your servants, the men of the region west of the Euphrates River. Let it be known to the king that the Jews who came from you have returned to us at Jerusalem. They are rebuilding that rebellious and evil city, finishing its walls and repairing its foundations. Let it now be known to the king that if that city is rebuilt and its walls are finished, they will not pay tribute, duty, or land tax, and the royal revenue will suffer. Since we have taken an oath of loyalty to the king, and it is not right for us to witness his dishonor, we have sent to inform the king that a search should be made in your predecessors' record books. In these record books, you will discover and verify that the city is a rebellious city, harmful to kings and provinces. There have been revolts in it since ancient times. That is why this city was destroyed. We advise the king that if this city is rebuilt and its walls are finished, you will not have any possessions west of the Euphrates. The king sent a reply to his chief deputy, Rehum, Shimshai the scribe, and the rest of their colleagues living in Samaria and elsewhere in the region of the Euphrates River. Greetings. The letter you sent us has been translated and read in my presence. I issued a decree and a search was conducted. It was discovered that this city has had uprisings against kings since ancient times, and there have been rebellions and revolts in it. Powerful kings have also ruled over Jerusalem and exercised authority over the whole region west of the Euphrates River, and tribute, duty, and land tax were paid to them. Therefore, issue an order for these men to stop, so that this city will not be rebuilt until a further decree has been pronounced by me. See that you do not neglect this matter, otherwise the damage will increase and the royal interests will suffer. As soon as the text of King Artaxerxes' letter was read to Rehum, Shimshai the scribe, and their colleagues, they immediately went to the Jews in Jerusalem and forcibly stopped them. Now the construction of God's house in Jerusalem had stopped and remained at a standstill until the second year of the reign of King Darius of Persia, which then sets us up for the time jump into the next chapter. Okay, so that's putting the kings in order. Why it's arranged this way, I don't know, other than maybe they just organize it by category of what was having trouble. Like, we're going to deal with the troubles with the city in this section, and then we're going to deal with troubles regarding the temple in this section. And chronology doesn't matter, because we're Jewish historians and chronology doesn't matter. Okay, so that's where we are. Incidentally, this Artaxerxes, we're going to see him again in the book of Nehemiah. This is the guy that Nehemiah is going to eventually convince to support rebuilding the walls in Jerusalem. So here he's opposed to it. Depending on how early in the reign these people got to Artaxerxes, and I'm guessing it's pretty early, like as soon as this guy was in power, they're like, hey, we need to write to you and make sure this doesn't go anywhere. But depending on when that happened, it is some 20 years before Nehemiah comes on the scene and convinces him to support the building project in Jerusalem. So it's not like he changed his mind overnight. I mean, what was I doing 20 years ago? I don't know. All right, so there we are. So what did you notice in there? What do you want to talk about? It's an interesting bunch of stuff there, isn't it? Go ahead, John. Oh, sorry. Yeah. 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 Now, I'm going to give some credit to Tatanai here. Oh, and by the way, there are historical records of a governor in that region, roughly that same time period, of a governor named Tatanai. He witnessed, I can't remember what he witnessed, but his signature is on something, chiseled. Not signature, but a chiseling of his name is on. This man witnessed this special thing that happened, right? So like, hey, look, there's his name. I'm going to give some credit to Tatanai. It does appear on surface that he's kind of against this temple being rebuilt. He wouldn't be writing to King Darius if he weren't opposed to the temple being rebuilt. But it is by his request that Darius goes and searches the records, because he forwarded the request of the Jewish elders to Darius. He could have not done that. But regardless of whatever his feelings were about the temple, he took their message and he sent it on. He was like, hey, here's what they have to say about it. Go research it. And you're right, Darius researches it. He sees, yeah, Cyrus said this is to be done with the king's protection, with our support. So Darius says, I'm going to reiterate that, and I'm going to go one further. If anyone else gets in the way of this temple getting built, their house is going to get torn down, and they're going to get killed. Yeah. So thanks, John. I did like Darius's detail about, like, you know, so that they can do their worship and make prayers for the king. That's him. So that these people we can add their God to, like, those who could potentially support me, because their people will pray for me. I did like that little bit in there, but yeah. Again, not the same Darius who knew Daniel. We're a bit after Daniel at this point. What else do you want to talk about in these chapters? Yeah. Another interesting on that point, John. So John's talking about God's foresight here and making sure that they have a place to build in the future, that they have a place that they can rebuild. Is back in 2 Kings, when everyone's getting carted away, there's this little almost footnote of a verse that says, basically, they carried away the rich and the powerful, but they left the poor behind in Jerusalem. And throughout the prophets, who do most of the prophets actually condemn? The powerful, the leaders, the rulers. And who are they victimizing? Who are they mistreating? The poor, the servant. And then when the exile actually happens, those poor, those oppressed people, they get to keep their homes. And it is the powerful, the religious leaders, the rulers who get removed. But that also means then Zerubbabel and Jeshua and those who come after are returning to a land that is not completely devoid of Jews. is not completely devoid of people who know God. There's already a remnant waiting for them there. There's a remnant now who've been humbled, who are returning from captivity, and there's a remnant that never left. And now they can work together. We have 50,000 people coming back. What we don't know is how many people are already there. Go ahead, Jordan. I was hoping someone would bring this up. So yay, gold star, Jordan.
So maybe they want to build the temple so that they can be part of the power of controlling the people. We don't know what their relationship has been with the people who were left behind. Since they were brought in, they might have had a higher status. They might be afraid of losing that status. But they might be just trying to join themselves and say, oh, our role is going to increase because these guys have the pleasure of the king. But whatever it was, we see that the returning Jews, they're kind of, at least for a while, learning from the mistakes of their ancestors, and they're not joining themselves to people who will pull them away from them.
Okay, yeah. So Jordan talks about these people at the beginning of chapter 4. And at least in the translation I was reading out of, like the Christian Standard, it calls them like the enemies of Judah and Benjamin. Now, I don't know if that means they currently feel animosity towards the Jewish people, or if it just means historically these would be people that we would have considered enemies in the past. Like this kind of identifies where they are coming from. All right? I don't know which of those it is. I'm not going to pretend to have confidence in that either. And they come to Zerubbabel, Jeshua, and the other elders, as Jordan was saying, and they're like, we want to help restoring this temple. Zerubbabel, Jeshua, and the elders say, no, thank you. This is going to be a work of God's people and God's people only. And what Jordan was saying is like, we don't know what their motives were. We don't know if this was some kind of power grab. We don't know if they were sincere. We don't know. I mean, I'm assuming they're not proselytized. Otherwise, they probably wouldn't be described the way that they are. They would be, in a way, God's people at that point. But Jordan's making a connection way back with the entrance to Canaan, where God's people pretty much immediately began bringing in outside influences in their work. Some through deception, you know, they got the wool pulled out over their eyes. Other times more willingly. And then throughout the period of the kings, making alliances, bringing in their gods, bringing in other outside influences. Jordan's saying maybe they're learning their lesson a little bit here. God's people are. And they're not starting by inviting outside influences in putting together what's going to be God's temple. Anyone else want to chat about that? Did I represent your points well? Thanks. Good. And John, go ahead.
When that northern kingdom was carried away in captivity,
Yeah.
and then they in turn had other people come into from other nations to take over where the northern kingdom had been before.
Yeah.
And they around Samaria and places like that. But it was that time a result of the people, and they brought their gods, their idols, shall we say, with them as well.
Yeah, it doesn't mention them worshiping any other gods here, but that could be something that's going on. Is like we want to worship God and maybe these others as well. And John's right. This is that group from that initial melting pot. So when these people say we were brought here by, throw the name out there, of Assyria, these people have been settled in the regions north of Judah since before the Babylonian captivity. So these people have been residents of this land for well over 100 years at this point. A lot of them would have known no other home. I'm only saying that to say they are going to feel a little bit possessive about this area when suddenly a whole new group comes in and starts building up this temple, but then also a city. And that one actually causes more consternation. What else do you want to talk about in here? Go ahead, Luke.
Their whole little speech is actually, to me, seems like if I was Zerubbabel, I would welcome them like, oh, you worship God, things. But it reminds me of Jesus' words where, like, in the end times, many will say, did we not prophesy in your name and cast out demons? And you don't just judge someone by what they proclaim, but by their fruits. So obviously, Zerubbabel and those people, they could see something we couldn't, just based on their words alone, it seems well-intentioned.
Yeah, thanks, Luke. Yeah, judging based off their words alone, it does sound well-intentioned. That's the point Luke was making. But also, as Jesus would say, we know people by their fruits. And was there something in their conduct, their culture, their lives that signaled to Zerubbabel and Jeshua of like, this isn't going to be a good mix. Now, it's pretty easy to draw a line of conclusion or a connection between these people offering to come and help, and then verse 4, after they get denied, then the people who were already in the land discouraged the people of Judah. It could be that this is motivated by the rejection. It could be that this is yet another group. I don't know. But at any rate, at this point, then this ball starts rolling of opposition. Of we don't want this temple here, and we don't want this city here. We've already talked about getting the temple back. Whole thing happened under Darius the First, not Darius the Mede, Darius the First of Persia. And I say that primarily to remind myself that we've got, if you count Darius the Mede, we've got 4 kings in the history of this nation named Darius. Incidentally, the very last king of the Persian Empire is named Darius, and he's who fell to Alexander the Great during the Macedonian conquests. And you can go to a museum in Napoli, in Italy, and there's a mosaic recovered from the city of Pompeii there that actually depicts the battle between Alexander and Darius III, last ruler of Persia. So field trip, the elders are paying. We're all going to Italy. Go ahead, John.
Call our attention to the time frame between the time that Zerubbabel brings his group up to 50,000 and the time when Ezra comes on the scene, which is
Yes.
going to do in the next chapter. But it's almost 80 years.
Yes.
78, something like that. And the temple is completed when Ezra comes up there, when Artaxerxes lets him come up there and try to help them get themselves back spiritually.
Yes. Yeah, good noticing. And there are some definite time jumps in here. I mean, the reign of King Ahasuerus or Xerxes the First is some 50 or so years after Cyrus. And then Artaxerxes is some 20 years or so after him. And then it's another 20 years before Nehemiah gets sent, and I think Ezra also. So depending on how we're rounding things, and I'm rounding up on accident, which is sending it too far, you've got a solid 80 or so years between Zerubbabel and team coming back, and then Nehemiah and Ezra coming along. If you notice, we're in the book of Ezra, and Ezra's name hasn't been mentioned once yet because he's not here yet. In fact, he hasn't even been born yet in some of these chapters in the book named after him. Where we do get the hang up is with rebuilding the city, don't we? That's where they don't get the support they want. Darius goes and looks up his set of records. I was like, yes, Cyrus commanded the temple to be rebuilt. Artaxerxes goes back into the records. There's no decree that the city's going to be rebuilt, just the temple. And then he's also like, yeah, you're right about those records, Mr. Governor, sir. These guys are troublemakers. In fact, not only are they troublemakers, but sometimes they've been pretty powerful themselves. And me, a pretty powerful person myself, doesn't want the chance for them to become pretty powerful people themselves. So let's say no. This is the decree of the king. So shall it be written, so shall it be done. And that's where Nehemiah is going to pick up. Now, we got a couple prophets name dropped in here, didn't we? We got Haggai, and we got Zechariah. On Sunday is going to be a meanwhile lesson, meaning it's happening at the same time as some of the stuff that we studied about today. Andy is going to cover those books, and there's going to be a lot in there about, like, you have built your own houses, but my house is sitting in, like, ruins. It's going to be very pointed about the fact that they've now been here for a while. They got the foundation laid, but at least for a bit, things fell by the wayside. Haggai and Zechariah come along, prophets of God, and they remind the people. They remind Zerubbabel and Jeshua and those elders, you have a job you haven't finished. You've let the discouragement of everything around you just make you stop. I think that's something that any of us could relate to, yeah? Just letting discouragement grind us to a halt. And so Haggai and Zechariah are going to say, get things back in gear. And we see that they do. And my favorite detail here in Ezra chapter 5 is that the prophets don't only tell them to get to work, but the prophets help with the work. It mentions the prophets helped too. And I think that's really cool. They didn't just say, do the work. They got involved in the work. And that's going to be a theme that we see carried on in Nehemiah when we get there. So we're taking a break from Ezra as of today. If you were super excited about Ezra chapter 7, sorry, you're going to have to wait for a couple of weeks. Because now we're going to go to Haggai and Nehemiah. And then after we're done with those two, we're going to kick off the book of Esther. Spend, I think, 3 lessons in Esther. And then we'll finish off the book of Ezra. All right? So before we finish up tonight, any more questions, comments, brilliant insights, and or epiphanies? Do you know what an epiphany is? It's a sudden bright idea. It's when you're watching those old Looney Tune cartoons and the light bulb goes off above someone's head. They just had an epiphany. If it's Wile E. Coyote, the epiphany is going to hurt him. If it goes off above my head, it'll probably hurt me. All right, let me take a quick look at my notes, see if I had anything to talk about that we didn't. I'll get my notes posted online soon on that page. That way, if you're curious about it, you can go check out the list of Persian kings. We talked about the things I had questions about. Yeah.
Was actually told or brought into the scene before he was even born.
Yeah.
Did we mention that?
Yeah, we mentioned that last time. Yeah, and how that might have actually motivated Cyrus a little bit. You know, if, say, someone like Daniel had shown him a scroll of Isaiah, I mean, like, hey, these people, it's time for them to go back home. And look, you were foretold to be their liberator. Like, whoa, this God's on my side, man. I'm going to. Yep, and that's exactly what he did. Yep. Yeah. All right. So thanks for the chat tonight. Thanks for the participation. I appreciate all of you, and I hope you have a lovely, safe drive home. We're dismissed.